Hey everybody, and welcome to episode 67 of the Revive Yourself podcast. Here we go.
Are you sick and tired of being sick and tired? Have you got a health issue that just won't go away no matter what you try? Then welcome to the Revive Yourself podcast, where we reveal the secrets to long-lasting health by getting to the root cause of problems that no one else is talking about. So you can have more energy, clear skin, healthier hair, a leaner physique, more confidence, and most importantly, do the things you love and live the life you deserve. Here's your host, Ryan Martin.
So guys, welcome to episode 67 of the Revive Yourself podcast. The feedback I got from Jason Christoph's episode has been phenomenal, and I'm glad you guys are really taking this on board and really going to get out there and, make the changes necessary for this 5G. It's going to be something we have to go out there and we have to start to, just put things in place and just let everyone know what's going on, because we're all in this together. As always, anyone dealing with a chronic health issue, head on over to www.reviveyourself.co. We've got our free 4-day mini course there, and I've been getting a lot of emails, people with chronic issues. I can only take on a certain amount of people. I've only actually got 2 spaces open at the moment, probably soon to be 1. So if you are looking for help with a chronic health issue, whether it be skin, gut, Alzheimer's, adrenal fatigue, thyroid issues, whatever it may be, chronic fatigue, diabetes, then you can get in touch with me at ryan@reviveyourself.co, or you can click on the contact link on the site. But yeah, I will jump on a call with you and see if and how we can help you. Otherwise, guys, today's interview is with Sal Di Stefano, and he's one of the host of a podcast called Mind Pump. I started listening to them about a year and a half ago, and they're 3 guys from America. There's Sal, along with Justin and Adam, and they've got Dougie, their producer, and they've got a really good podcast that integrates the fitness industry with health, but Sal's a lot like me. He's been in the fitness industry. He's had his own issues with his gut, but he dives a lot into the natural health world with the other 2 now, and their podcast incorporates all that. And I'm just really interested to get him on the show and just talk about his experience. He's been through a lot of things with his divorce, with his kids, and how he's implementing certain strategies with them for their health and around and different electronic devices, and also talking about just the Mind Pump journey and what got him into it, and the guests they interview, and just digging into a lot around this natural health industry, and really why he got into it, why they started Mind Pump, and also the best information for the clients and how to get it across, and understanding that health and not aesthetics is the underlying root goal. So without further ado, here's Sal, and as always, I'll see you on the other side. So, Sal Di Stefano, welcome to the Revive Yourself podcast. How are you doing today, mate?
I'm doing good, brother. Thanks for having me on.
No worries. Yourself, Adam, and Justin have been part of my day now for, I'd say, just over a year, maybe even more actually, maybe about a year and a half. I stumbled across your podcast about that time. I was just searching Paul Chek, and your first interview come up with him, and listened to it, and obviously what Paul's like. It was a phenomenal interview, but then just you 3 had a really good chemistry, so I've been listening to you ever since, and it's been a great journey really with you, and I've seen you guys are blowing up now, right?
Yeah, we started the podcast about 3.5 years ago, and it's been just a blast ever since. I mean, you talk about Paul Chek, what a great guest, extremely polarizing, which is interesting to me, how he can be polarizing, just because I think his message is so universal, but I think it's the way he delivers the message. And so we try to get people on the show that will stir up that kind of a conversation, where he's going to challenge people's beliefs and get people to think about their own beliefs. And I think at the end of that, or at the other end of that, is typically growth. As long as somebody's open-minded, you'll get growth, whether you agree or disagree with the person you're listening to. If it gets you thinking, it's always a good thing, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, with Paul, I had him on my show about about a month ago, and people were just like raving about it. The thing is, you see, he's polarizing. To me, he's only polarizing to people that don't maybe are new into the industry, or people that I think it was I think it might have been you who said it, or one of your guests might have said it. I said, like, the more you know, the more you realise that he knows. And so he's done. The thing is, as I always tell people, that he's read more books, he's done more. He's been in this game a long time now. He's 56 now, and so you're listening to a guy with a wealth of experience, a lot of knowledge, and do everything. And that interview, I think you got 3 interviews with him. They're all really, really good, and they delve into a lot of the different topics that people. I mean, traditionally, this is one of the things I want to actually go into how you started, like the mind pump thing. But you know, one of the big things that I've seen. I mean, you guys were in the fitness industry for a long time, but it's something that I was in for a long time. But you realise once you actually get ill, because on my background is I got ill. I got really ill when I was like 17 to 22, and you quickly realise that the fitness industry hasn't actually got that much to do with health. Really, apart from just working out. And when it comes to a lot of the supplements, a lot of the foods you've been told to eat, a lot of them could be highly allergenic and inflammatory. And like when you're looking at someone like Paul, he goes into all that, which is really, really interesting. So, I mean, just for this listeners, like, how did you guys like come together? How did Mind Pump really start?
Well, I've been in fitness personally for, about 20. Let me think now. Maybe 26 years, but professionally I've been in fitness for over 20 years. Mm-hmm. Adam and Justin, both about 15 years, and we all worked in for 24 Hour Fitness, which, if you're not familiar with that company in the U.S., it is the largest like fitness club chain organization in the world. And at the time when I was working with them, they were going through one of their first big growth spurts. And towards the end of my career, I had heard about Adam in particular. We were top performers in this company, and there was, they had about 400 to 500 clubs at the time, and you would know about the top guys in the company because award ceremonies and stuff like that. So I'd heard about him, never really met him or never really talked to him. And fast forward, years later, I owned a wellness studio on my own. I had left that company, and I had created this program called MAPS Anabolic. It's actually one of the programs that we sell on our show. And it's a fitness program. It's an exercise programming. And it's very counter to the typical bodybuilder bro split type of routine, but it's also very effective and all that stuff. And so I put together some sales material with Doug, who's now our producer. And I had been following Adam on social media for a little while. And every once in a while we would message each other comments about, the industry and where it's going and our predictions. And so I sent him my sales video material on Maps and sent him the program, and he called me up and he's like, "This is fantastic. This is exactly kind of the direction that I want to go myself." And we decided starting a podcast together would be a good idea. And so we all met and had great conversation. The very first time I sat down with Adam and Justin, we sat down and talked for about 3 or 4 hours. It just went off. And really what it was at the time, this is about maybe 4.5 years ago. So the podcast has been live for about 3.5 years ago, mm-hmm. but we all met maybe 4.5 years ago. And at the time I sat down and I talked about things like, here's the thing with fitness, or health, I should say, is it's all compartmentalized. You have your aesthetic based fitness, industry side, which is about fat loss. It's about looking muscular. It's about 6-packs. It's about taking supplements, maximum muscle, maximum fat loss, that kind of stuff. Then you also had this like wellness side of fitness, which was about health and longevity and quality of life. And it included things like yoga, meditation, eating anti-inflammatory foods, avoiding heavily processed foods, that kind of stuff. And, they never crossed over. Like, it never really, like, you either one or the other. If you were selling a product or talking about fitness, you either were on the, the woo-woo wellness side, or you were on the super hardcore fitness performance muscle building side. And so when we sat down, because we had been doing this for so long, I think when you're in fitness as long as we have, if you're really passionate about it and it's truly something that drives you, at some point you start to realize that the humans are this organism that encompasses everything, like not just, muscle and biomechanics and fat loss and macros and calories, but also the emotional state, the mental state, the ability to manage stress, growth, personal growth, spiritual growth. Like all those things kind of, cover total health and wellness. And so we'd all knew that it was kind of crazy that nobody really was talking about the human as a whole organism. Mm-hmm. And so we decided, look, we want to start a show and talk about all these different things and, uncover or, hammer head on the myths that we see that are promoted in fitness that, are designed to sell products and to get people to do things. Like, let's hammer those myths. Let's go after those golden, calves of information, common knowledge, things that people took for granted as like truth, when in reality we knew they were false. And so that was really the goal. And then the other part of it that we really didn't discuss too much, it just kind of became a part of our flavor, was that we were very, raw, very uncensored, and that we had a great chemistry, so we could talk and laugh and bullshit and cuss and whatever. And so it that kind of brought people in because it was entertaining. And that was kind of the beginning of the show. And a lot of the beginning of the show was hammering on the myths. Some of our earliest episodes were things like, eating small meals throughout the day is a myth, like in terms of fat loss and muscle building. Like that was a big one. And, other big ones were, protein intake. You can definitely overdo it, and you don't need the ridiculous amounts that the supplement industry has you believing. And then we went after body part split routines and how those are probably not effective for most people, or they definitely aren't effective for most people, even if it's just for muscle building, and how, making yourself healthier will contribute to your aesthetic goals far better than your aesthetic goals will contribute to your health.
Sal, this is why, I just want to say, this is why I've stuck around with you guys for so long, because you do that. Because listen to some others, and like, to be honest with you, I'm from an athletic background, like Justin for sports, and you listen to it, and a lot of it, they talk about building it, and it's just like bro stuff. Whereas you guys, you've done that. So I said, like the myths you go after, you combine like the muscle building side of it with that, and that's why it's so. In fact, for me, it was really refreshing to hear, because I'm part of the natural health industry. I'm very holistic with what we do, and to hear that, it was like brilliant. When you also, like, for example, you've had your own histories with your gut, and so if you go and look at Sal's pictures, Sal's in good shape. He's very muscular, good shape. All three of the guys are, and you even went after like cutting out breakfast, right? Breakfast being the most important meal of the day. That was another myth you went after.
Yeah, we went after a lot of the myths. Like I said, if you stay in this long enough, and if you're very passionate about it, and especially if you work with people, because we trained people, right? For decades, we trained clients. So I've trained personally, thousands of people. And if you really care about getting people to progress in a real long-term, solid way, like I'm not just trying to get this person in shape, for over the next, couple months or 3 months. I'm trying to get them to adopt a lifestyle that's going to benefit them for the rest of their life. You gain wisdom as a result. Like, you have all this knowledge. Like, I know the right things, or I know what the literature says, I know what the science says, but then I have to combine that with experience. Like, what actually works, and not only what works, what are people going to do?
Yeah, what people going to do, yeah.
And how do what's the most effective way to communicate this so that people will understand it? Because one thing that I understood early on as a trainer was, I have all this information in my head, or all this understanding in regards to fitness. Like, I know when someone comes to me and says, I want to lose 30 pounds, or I want to get better mobility, I want to improve my health, I have generally a really, really good idea of what's going to work for them, just because it's my field, this is my profession, my passion, right? Just like if I went to a plumber or an electrician and I told them what I want done in my house, they'll have a very good idea of what needs to happen. But the problem was getting that information, or at least getting a person to understand and agree upon and implement that information in their own life. So how could I take what's in my mind and in my body, what I understand, transfer it to another person so that, they automatically get it? You know what I'm saying? Like, oh, I get it. This is how I need to live. Mm-hmm. And the way to do that, really, I can't transplant it. We're not in the Matrix. I can't plug the brain into something and just download it.
We are in the Matrix, but not that way, yeah.
Right. So what I have to do is I have to communicate using my words, and I have to convince them. I have to be an effective communicator. So I'll give you an example, right? So one of the reasons why the fitness industry, focuses so heavily on the aesthetic, on fat loss, muscle building, looking good, looking sexy, and one of the reasons why they focus so much on get there quick, 30 days, you're going to get in shape, take this pill, it's the magic pill. The reason why they do this, or part of the reason, is because consumers demand it. Like, consumers demand the impossible, so you're going to get a bunch of producers who are going to try to deliver the impossible and lie to you. So it's almost like we're asking for it. Like, people love hearing that they're going to take a pill and it's going to solve all the problems, or they don't want to hear
magic bullet approach, right? People usually overestimate what they can do in usually overestimate what they can do in 6 weeks, and usually underestimate what they can do in a year, because they just want a magic bullet approach.
Of course, and they don't, and you don't want to hear, like, you want to hear from somebody, oh, cool, do this one thing, it's real easy, I'll get in shape. They don't want to hear it's going to take a complete change in your understanding of how you eat, your relationship to food, exercise. It's going to be a lifestyle change that needs to be permanent.
100%.
Like, nobody wants to hear that. So you have to be able to communicate it effectively. So I'll give you a great example. Like, one of the most effective things that I'll say to people to open up the conversation and get them to kind of pay attention is, and it's a true one, by the way, I'll never lie, it's always based on integrity, is if you chase aesthetics, if you chase the fat loss and the muscle building and all you care about is that, you're not going to get good health, and the aesthetics eventually will fail, and you won't get those for long either. If you chase health, if all you ever do is chase optimal health, then not only will you get great health, but you'll get a great deal of the aesthetics, because aesthetics are a reflection or a representation of your overall health. And if you're very, very healthy, you're gonna for the most part look pretty damn good. And so I sell it. I have to sell it that way. And it's true. It is true. But when I say that, then when I'm talking to somebody who does, like, if I just say to someone, hey, you got to get healthy, they're like, I don't care about that. I just want to look good for the beach. But if I say to them, look, if you get healthy and focus on that, not only are you going to look good for the beach, but you'll look good forever. And if all you ever do is chase looking good for the beach, you might achieve that in a short period of time, but eventually your health is going to fail and your aesthetics are going to fail as well. I might start to get through to people. And so it's really about how we communicate these ideas, how we communicate this knowledge based on our wisdom of how we worked with all these people. And that's what we try to do on the show. And, it's also this idea that when it comes to, because here's something else that people in the fitness industry do that I think is counterproductive, is that they present this idea of health as this all or nothing type of thing, because they tend to forget that, for example, I'll give you a good example. When it comes to nutrition, when it comes to food, right? If you're like a hardcore fitness fanatic or health professional, you may say to someone, hey, eating a cupcake is terrible for your health. Just never eat it. There's never a time when eating a cupcake will be good for you. And the problem with that is there's a lot of problems with that. Number one, it's false. It's actually not true.
Yep, not true.
Number two is if you do in fact accomplish your, the goal of getting that person to never eat these types of foods, you start to develop or promote another eating disorder called orthorexia, which is where you have to measure and weigh and everything has to be a perfect or whatever, and you can never enjoy life and all those other things. So what happens is they don't realize that food, for example, is not only does it represent, or not only does it provide, properties and things and nutrients and macronutrients that'll benefit your physical body, your proteins, your fats, your carbs, your micronutrients, your phytonutrients, your whatever, that can contribute or take away from your physical health. But there's other things involved with food that may contribute or take away from, say, your emotional health, the connections with people around you. Yeah. Maybe a little bit of reprieve at this moment might benefit you in the long term. Like, here's an easy example, right?
It's food for the soul, though, right, Sal? It's food. Every tribe had it. It's food for the soul,
That's right. So maybe it's my daughter's birthday. It's homemade cupcakes. I'm enjoying this moment. So is it healthy for me to enjoy my daughter's birthday with my daughter and the people around me and eat this cupcake? Well, sure, absolutely. So there's a balance. There's a natural balance that occurs when you understand that health and wellness encompasses all of those things. And then it's not this, black and white, on again, off again type of thing that we tend to see because, to be quite honest, the worst eating disorders I've ever seen in my entire life I've seen from people who are in fitness, who are in the fitness industry. Terrible. Mm-hmm. If you take 100 fitness competitors and magazine cover models and you follow them around and look how their relationship is with food, I guarantee you there won't be 4 out of 5 psychologists or psychiatrists will say, yeah, that person has disordered eating. So it's, it encompasses all those things. And we try to communicate that as much as possible on the show.
Yeah, no, 100% you do. I mean, what you said there, one of my taglines, been for a long time, is you can look good and not be healthy, but once you're healthy, you're always going to look good. And that's a big thing. It's coming at it from a different way, It's coming at it just from getting your health right. And look, unless you have got a chronic gut issue and we're trying to heal it, unless you've got some sort of, or maybe a chronic skin issue or other chronic health issue where eating that cupcake is going to give you a disaster, like a health eruption in terms of your gut or whatever it is, and you need to stay away from it for a little bit of time because we're healing you. 100% agree with you. That food for the soul and having time with your friends and family and enjoying that and being social is a huge part of health. You can't just be locked away and I'm not going to go out because I'm not going to eat that. I mean, on a Saturday after sport, I play football with my friends and we have a few beers, and I do things before and afterwards to have the probiotics, milk thistle, for example. A few mushroom complex, whatever it is to do before I set the stage. But having that time with my friends, it's a huge part of my social life. And if I didn't do it, I'm going to go home and just sit there on my own? No, and we're going to sit there and not enjoy it, watch everyone else have fun. It's a huge part of it. But for a lot of people that we deal with, and probably you as well, Sal, you've got to get someone to that level of health first. But for the average person, telling people that's unfortunately. With a lot of, I know your food over there is worse than ours over here. We're not with the amount of pesticides, herbicides, insecticides, rodenticides, and glyphosate now sprayed over the wheat. It's terrible. But just doing things. I think you were even talking to Justin about the other day, saying he gets a really bad reaction to gluten now, whereas he never used to. Just because he can take it in 5 minutes, which if you get that, obviously. You're probably best off to stay away from it, but hugely agree with the whole mental part of it. And that's why I really like that. It's weird because you're talking about the guests you get on. People don't understand. I actually just shot a video myself about this, Sal, where I was talking about, because I put something else about John Taylor Gatto up. I was talking about education system on my Twitter, and someone was like, "Oh, you're expert in that now as well." And I was like, "Well, no, as a holistic health coach, we actually have to delve into everything because the education system, how people are learning, how you got taught, and understanding what the reason were behind that, and then the law gets common law and civil law, and then you're going into your nutrition, how who's behind it, pharmaceutical companies, medical industries, and it's understanding that and how people have been programmed and the breathing and everything going on. When you're a holistic health coach, you need to know all this because, as you said, it is all part of someone's health, right?
It is.
I think. Even their political views, I know you go on about it, I see your things, and it's a huge part of it because someone gets up in the morning, reads the paper, and oh my God, straight away, out of their parasympathetic nervous system into their sympathetic, stress, cortisol up through the roof, blood pressure raised, all because they read a paper.
Yeah, I think, as a holistic, health expert or as a really good personal trainer or fitness professional, really your job is never to have all the answers.
No.
First off, nobody has all the answers. No. I don't care who you are. And if you think you have all the answers, well, that's your first sign that you're very, very misinformed, overconfident in yourself, and you're probably going to do someone harm. Really, the goal is to be a maven for for information. So if someone comes to me and says,
I like that.
I have this, I'm very stressed out. My relationship with my wife or my husband is terrible, so I'm having poor sleep right now. Well, I may know somebody that's a sleep expert that can talk and help you, or I may know someone that is a relationship expert that can help you. My goal is to point out that all of these things contribute to the state of your health and to help you yourself identify them. Because I think a lot of people don't understand, or at least are, they're in that stage of unconscious incompetence when it comes to a lot of these things and how they affect their state of well-being. And my job is just to kind of bring them to that conscious incompetence to where people go, oh, wow, I didn't know that I didn't know that. And that may be contributing to, how I feel and, the quality of my life. And then my job is to kind of point them in the direction of where they can find more information or people that I may personally know. And that's always kind of been my approach. I've always gotten far more respect for my clients from saying things like, I don't know, but let me help you find out, versus, knowing the answer, to every question they have or every problem they have.
Also putting them in, like, for example, you say, well, the research from this shows, you say, when I say this, like, go and look at this, or give them the information to go and learn themselves, because they might take out certain bits that is really relevant to them that not as really relevant to you. But it's just about having that knowledge that everything does matter. I mean, it's like having a pie, right? And it's all different slices. If you cut the pie into 8 different slices, all different parts of that pie make the whole. And that's the thing, like, people don't generally, because we've been sort of sold this sort of in our head, distracted life and not going into deeper issues or not understanding how it all impacts your health. People just stay in that sort of, they don't go deep enough. And once they start to understand it, that's the thing, just to maybe get to think differently and get them to understand and learn. Like, I mean, you mentioned something there about their relationship or about their wife or husband. Something you've gone through was you've mentioned it quite a few on the show. It's like you went through a divorce. You said it's one of the most painful aspects you've been through. Did that affect? First of all, did that affect your health? And second of all, you've got 2 kids with your ex-wife. Has that been a challenge in terms of getting her on board with the health and things you do, or has it been quite an easy thing to navigate?
No, it's the most difficult thing I've ever done. Of course it impacted my health. Mm-hmm. I think anything you do will impact your health in one way or another. Mm-hmm. But it was a very difficult, stressful process and situation. And, I'm very fortunate in the sense that, I'm surrounded by a family that really cares about me. And I also have, people I work with who are, very self-aware, who are there to support me, and have a great girlfriend. And, when you go through something like that, when it comes to exercise and nutrition, I view them as tools that I can manipulate and use to help me through my everyday life. So sometimes I use exercise and sometimes I use nutrition to maximize performance, because everything's going great in my life and I feel great. And now I want to see how strong I can get and how fast I can be and how much stamina I can build and, and all that stuff. And that becomes that's a net positive for my life. It's something I enjoy doing. It's a pleasure. I do it for the sake of doing it, which is great when you can get to a state where you work out for the sake of working out because you enjoy doing it. Mm-hmm. You've now entered into a state where that's probably what you're probably never going to stop now at that point. Now you're not, it's not something that you'll ever stop. However, when I've gone through difficult, stressful, challenging times in my life, like my divorce, exercise and nutrition become tools to help mitigate some of that damage, or to keep me strong and healthy physically and mentally, so that I can be at my whatever my peak potential is at that moment, to be able to handle these things. Because what you have to ask yourself is, will a fit, healthy, well-rested version of me handle this stressful situation better than a not fit, eating unhealthy, maybe not well-rested version of me? And the answer is almost always going to be yes, of course. Mm-hmm. So during that period of time, my workouts weren't really focused on performance or strength or fat loss or muscle building, because it wouldn't have made sense. I couldn't go there. I couldn't push my body that way. My focus was mobility. My focus was stress relief. My focus was, it was a form of meditation. It was a form of being present. When I work out, I can put my headphones on. I can get into my zone. And for that hour, that's all I'm doing. That's all I'm thinking about. I'm also keeping my body healthy. I'm also keeping my body in a state where it can handle the stress a little bit better. I'm feeding myself much more carefully during that period of time, because stress really affects the body, everything from your hormones. I'm pretty sure my testosterone dropped. I'm pretty sure cortisol was elevated most of the time. I know that my inflammatory markers were probably higher because your body senses an emotional or mental insult in a very similar way to a physical insult. Like if you have a virus or if you cut yourself, inflammatory markers go up because your body's protecting itself. Well, if I have a mental or emotional stress, the body does the same thing because it doesn't discern between a stress that you have with your girlfriend or your ex-wife. It's a stress.
Some age stress, right?
Yeah, and any stress can pose a risk to you. So inflammatory markers go up, cortisol goes up to give you more energy in the short term. Burn more of that energy. You're just going to be in a state that's survival, which you can kind of burn yourself out or cause a lot of problems. So really, I was trying to take care of myself as good as possible with the exercise and nutrition. And then from the emotional standpoint, I tell you what, the hardest challenges in life, at least for me, have also presented to be the biggest opportunities for growth. That divorce or my divorce turned me into a much better, much more empathetic, patient individual. I'm definitely not the same person I was when I was married as I am now. And it just pushed me in that direction. Now I could have crumbled. I could have chosen to be angry and resentful, but I had some very strong motivations in the form of 2 children that I love more than anything. Mm-hmm. And I can empathize and understand why some men in particular run away or disconnect. It's much more common for men to take the role of being the weekend dad or not being involved at all. There's a lot of absent fathers in the world, far more than mothers, and I'm sure there's a biological reason for that. And I'm also sure there's a societal
relationship issue as well, I reckon.
Yeah, and also societal, reason for that. I mean, it's much more acceptable for a man to kind of be the weekend dad than it would be for the mother. Mm-hmm. And there's, we don't have to go into all that, but I love my kids very much, and I said, okay, I got to put my ego aside as much as I don't want to ever see this other person again, or as much as I have all this resentment and she has her own resentment. And believe me, there's always 2 sides to the equation. So it's almost never just one side, although sometimes it is. I had to acknowledge my participation in that the dissolvement of our marriage. And so I had to put all that stuff aside, and I had to say, okay, how can I behave in a way so that we can work together to co-parent these children who, they had nothing to do with the fact that our marriage didn't work, or at least they didn't have anything to do with, it wasn't their fault. It was our fault. So what can I do? What can we do to make this the best possible version of this scenario? And in my mind, my opinion, it was, me and my ex-wife working together and co-parenting, and potentially in the future doing so as cordial friends. I'm probably never going to be like best friends with her, but we'll be cordial and we'll work together because we both share these children in some respect. And I'm going to be as involved as possible because I know how difficult of a transition that can be for my children. And let me tell you, it sounds great. It sounds all awesome the way I'm saying it. And people are listening going, yeah, that sounds awesome. Very, very difficult. Very, very, very difficult thing to do. You definitely, you're going to snap at each other. You're going to do things. There's a lot of built up resentment and anger. Most of it's resolved. Some of it's still there. I acknowledge that. But at the end of the day, like, what's the desired outcome? That we hate each other and we're angry with each other? Or is the desired outcome that we make the best of the situation, both for the kids' sake and for our own? Because, here's the bottom line. If I want to be in my children's life as a father, then I have to be in my ex-wife's life because she's their mother, right? So we're always going to be in each other's life if we want to be in our children's lives in some way. So I might as well make the best of it. And I'll tell you what, God bless my girlfriend and her boyfriend, because now we have significant others. Because I can't imagine how difficult it must be to be on the other end of that. Because now I have a decent relationship with her, and we talk often about the children. And of course, that can challenge our new other halves because you're talking to your ex and all that stuff. But it's better. It's a better version of what that could potentially turn into. And so, I mean, that's really the bottom line is like, can I, be growth minded? Can I put my ego aside? Can I move forward for the sake of my children, for the sake of myself, to turn this into the best version of what it can potentially be? And that's the goal. And I try and approach a lot of things that way. It doesn't make it easy. Many times it makes it more difficult in the beginning, but I think in the end it turns out, at least the potential, versions turn out much better if you approach them that way.
I mean, it's like the more you grow, the more you're trying to. It's weird, like as you said, you've grown through this, and you're more empathetic, and you've become a different person. You're not the same person. You do that. It's hard sometimes because sometimes as you grow as a person, you've got these other people that aren't on the same journey as you. They can pull you back into the old version of you that you don't want to be. They can trigger things off. So what has been? I know you said it's been like very, very difficult. What has been the most difficult aspect of that, Sal?
Well, there's a lot of things. Guilt. Guilt is a very, very, that's a very common, at least from what I've read and from people I've talked to in a similar situation. Guilt is a very common feeling that you will have as a divorced parent. Guilt for the challenge and the stress and the grief and sorrow that you may be putting your children through, because most children don't want to see their parents divorce. It's a kind of a form of chaos. They don't know what to expect. Where am I going to be? What's this going to look like? Are you still going to love me? Are you still going to be around? Like all these potential things. And so you have a lot of guilt surrounding that. So in the beginning, it's almost like you want to give your kids everything. You want to give them too much. You want to buy them whatever they want. You want to give in to all their demands because you want to be okay. You want to be good. You don't want to have them, have any pain as a result. So that was very difficult, difficult thing to deal with too, because anytime my kids would have a challenge, let's say one of my kids had a challenge at school or with their friend, or maybe they couldn't sleep at night. It was very easy for me to place the blame on myself and the divorce. Like, my daughter can't sleep tonight. It's because of all the turmoil of this divorce, or it's all the, she's going through a difficult time, or, if my kid didn't do good in school, it must be because of this. And so that's a very difficult thing to process and go through. It's also a difficult thing to understand that these challenges also present an opportunity for your own kids for growth, and it can also be a positive. It can be a positive thing. That's a difficult thing to understand, because you don't want to think that this can be a positive thing for your poor kid. The other difficult thing, this is a personal one. I was definitely involved as a father while I was married, but really my involvement was as the fun dad. Here, we're going to play, we're going to do things. I'm going to love you. I'm going to hug you. I'm going to kiss you. But I wasn't very involved at all in the day-to-day planning, scheduling, school stuff, making lunches, taking them to the doctor's appointments, that kind of stuff. I wasn't very involved at all with that. It was very, the kind of traditional stereotypical male role, I think, that some of us fall into. So when we got divorced and now I have dual custody, when my kids are with me, I have to take care of all those things. And so it was a major, major learning curve. It's like, boom, I was thrust into this new thing. And luckily I have a girlfriend that helps me quite a bit, but it was very, very challenging, very difficult, and very stressful, because I would forget appointments. I'd forget to do this. Oh no, the homework wasn't done, or, oh, you're supposed to dress this way for school today because it's Spirit Week or whatever. And I'd forget, and I'd have to, ask my ex-wife, like, what's going on or whatever. And she would get irritated and she'd say, well, you need to figure this out now. So that was a very, difficult, part of the transition. The other difficult thing I think is, once the relationship starts to develop, it's a difficult thing for if you start to date someone else, because now when you're dating someone else, not only do you have two children that are going to be with you half the time if you're doing what I do, which is dual custody. So that can be a transition, but also, you have an ex-wife or an ex-husband, or whatever that you're also dealing with, and that can have its own challenges. If you have a terrible relationship, well, now that's one difficult, process. If you have a great relationship, that can be difficult as well. I can only imagine what it would be like to date someone who's talking to their ex on a regular basis about their kids, and you may feel like that's kind of weird, or how do I deal with that? So that can be a challenge. The whole thing is a challenge. It's not, I don't know if you would consider it ideal. However, I think the way you approach it can make it a very positive thing. I can look and see that there's been a lot of positives as a result. I'm a better father now than I was when I was married. That's for sure. Much more involved, much more present. I had to reevaluate how I was before. I had to be very honest and look at things and how I was. And so I'm much better in that regard. I'm much more organized. I still need to get better, but I'm much more organized than I was before. I think I'm probably going to have a better relationship with my ex-wife than I had before when I was married, because there's none of that other stuff in between. It's just, look, we're just doing this for the benefit of the children. We're both on board with that. So there's been a lot of positives as well. During that period of time, my health it was very difficult to maintain good health because I was under a tremendous amount of stress. I had experienced something like that before when, I had a close family member of mine who was diagnosed with cancer, terminal cancer. And during that period of time, my health, suffered a little bit as well. So, that's kind of part of it. But I think I've grown from that as well, because I've really learned on how to use all the tools at my disposal to maintain myself as good in a possible way, so that the best version of myself can tackle these things. And that's a skill that I think can come in handy in life, because I'm pretty sure that's not going to be the last time I have a difficult, stressful challenge. I'm pretty sure there's going to be more, if I'm lucky enough to live a long life, along the way.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, that's where sort of like self-development, self-improvement comes in, One of the things that I've heard you talk, that conversation there, I could take that so many different ways, what you just said. There's about 3 things I want to ask you, but we're on the clock, so I'm going to go with the one that I think is going to be really relevant to a lot of our listeners as well, is you do have 2 kids, and they're growing up in a time where technology is rife, iPads, mobile phones, obviously like food, etc. And listening to you guys talk, you've got some interesting. You've done something interesting with your 2 kids in terms of limiting their use of certain electronic devices, and you've noticed an improvement in their behaviour, and also some of the things I think Justin was mentioning. I think you was mentioning as well in terms of like rewards, in terms of not just giving them everything on a plate when they wanted it. Because I remember you talking about, I think it's what the pill, or the magic pill, when talking about, how much diet impacts children's health, especially if they've got a chronic illness. It's unbelievable. And people saying, look, my kid won't eat that. It's like, well, if that's the only option they've got, give them a week or so, they will eat it. But it's just interesting how you've approached this with your 2, because I know that people these days, I still have a lot of clients when we go through this as well, but for people out there that are not my clients or your clients, etc., what things have you implemented, or what have you seen that's worked really well? Because it seems to me a lot of these children, that seems to me, I know for a fact a lot of these illnesses are down to diet, lifestyle, etc., but also that kids are sort of ruling the roost in the house, and they're saying, I won't eat this, I won't eat that, and parents, because for an easy life, will give it to them. So what have you done with that, Sal? What pearls of wisdom can you offer the audience for this?
Well, first off, I don't want to make any claims that I'm an expert by any stretch of the imagination. No. I was just very interested in your approach, because I was listening to it and I was thinking, because I myself haven't got any kids, so it's easy for me to say this, but for someone who's actually got kids, it can be quite an interesting perspective on things. Oh, right. Raising kids is a learning process. I don't care who you are, you're going to learn the entire time. But I think we can all agree. I don't think there's anybody who will disagree with this, or at least anybody who's reasonable who would disagree with the following statement. Everything you put in your mouth affects you in one way, shape, or form, right? It's going to affect you in physical ways. It can affect you emotionally. There are things within the food that cause chemical chain reactions within the body. So we all know that what you eat, that literally becomes a part of you. So we all understand that. Now, when it comes to children, or when it comes to anybody, but it's particularly your children, what you say has so much smaller of an impact than what you do. What you do and how you behave as a parent has a far, far stronger, greater impact on your children than the words or the lectures or the things you try to tell your children to do. So that's an important thing to understand, because when it comes to eating in a way that is conducive to healthy, physical and emotional and mental development, sitting there and telling your kids what they should and shouldn't eat isn't going to be nearly as effective as just demonstrating how to eat and what we eat. And so, I've had clients they'll come train with me and they'll bring their kid with them, and then they'll tell me halfway through the workout, can you tell my son why it's a bad idea to eat ice cream every night, before going to bed? And, I'll look at the parent and I'll say, well, why do you have ice cream in your home? And why is anybody eating ice cream before bed? And we'll have that conversation. Not that I'm judging them, but
yeah.
But really, most children don't grocery shop, right? Most children don't go to the store and buy the food for the house. They're going to eat in ways and patterns that you eat, and it doesn't necessarily need to be a discussion unless they ask you questions. So here's an example of, and this was a brilliant suggestion by my girlfriend on a way to approach eating with my children. It's worked beautifully. When we have dinner with the kids, we don't even talk about it. It's just the order that we eat. We bring out, if we have 3 courses, for example, we'll bring out the first course, which will be vegetables. So here's your vegetables. We'll put on everybody's plate, and then we'll eat. Now, if my kids want to eat that or not, it's totally up to them. Now, I'm not, and I know, the older generations kind of hammered into us the notion that you need to force feed your kid. They have to finish everything all the time. And I get where that came from. That came from that's a scarcity mindset.
They have rations and stuff, didn't they? Yeah.
Yeah, it made sense. It made sense for my grandparents' time. It made sense why we would force feed children. And
that's probably why a lot of these cultures as well, going back, like they equate food with love. You go around to Italian families, I see in Greek, and even English. You go around your grandparents, they keep on giving you food because they associate it with love, because they didn't have much when they were growing up.
Of course. I mean, when I was a kid, I'm Italian, right? My family, that's my family's culture, I should say. And, my grandma and my mom would follow us around with food, constantly stuffing food into our mouths. And, that's just what was normal. So when we bring out the food, here's your vegetables. If you don't want to eat it, that's fine, but you don't get to eat the next course. Okay. Mm-hmm. You have to finish this before you move on to the next course. So if my child says, I don't want any more, and we'll say, okay, well then you don't have to eat anymore. And they'll say, well, I want to eat the next thing. Well, you have to finish this first before we go. And it's just not a big deal. The next course that we bring out is the protein fat course, which will be meat typically, whether it's chicken, lamb, beef, fish, whatever. Mm-hmm. That's the next course. And so I do these in order of importance. In vegetables, I put first, mainly because if I don't put that first, nobody's going to eat the vegetables. So I just put those first. Then the next most important thing is the meat and protein, and or the protein and fat. They'll eat that. When they finish that, then we'll move on to the starch, if we have a starch available. And then they'll finish that, which is, rice, or sometimes we'll have organic pasta, or sometimes fruit or something like that. And it's just the way we eat. It's not a problem. I don't force feed my kids. If they don't want to eat, that's fine. I know they're not going to starve. No child is going to, consciously try to starve themselves, or at least most children won't do that. So you don't need to worry about that. And that's pretty much it. Now, do we have treats and snacks and sweets and stuff like that? We do, but it's typically a special occasion. What I mean by that is I don't have a cupboard where the kids can open and grab chips, grab crackers, grab whatever, just to eat whenever they want. I don't have that for anybody. I don't have that for me either. So if we're going to eat something like that, it's typically a treat, like we're after dinner, we've got some time. Hey, let's go drive to get some ice cream. So it's kind of a thing that we do together. We sit down, we'll eat, and we'll have a good time. And it's not very common. It's important to understand too that your kids are going to grow up in the world, and the world has these foods. And at some point, they're going to make these decisions for themselves. And so if I'm too strict or tyrannical in one direction, at some point, most kids they're going to rebel. That's what children do. whether they go off to college and do it or whatever. And what you don't want to do is create such a tyrannical situation to where they rebel in a way where, they go crazy with it. Now they've developed a bad relationship to food because, my dad wouldn't let me ever have sugar because he said it was poison. And, well, now I'm off to college and I can do what I want. So I'm going to, whatever. So I want to develop, relationship with food with my kids where they understand that and they make that decision themselves at some point, and it's a healthy type of decision. Now, when it comes to electronics, here's the deal. And by the way, with food, what we're starting to see now with new parents, the young millennials now that are starting to have children, is that they are actually have better eating habits than their parents did, for sure. Millennials are starting to, they eat more vegetables. They're more likely to buy organic. They're less likely to overeat. For the first time in a long time, a generation seems to be moving in the right direction. It's the evidence is kind of new and preliminary, but it looks like it. And I believe it. And the reason why I believe it is that it looks, the way society tends to learn its lesson is it typically takes a couple generations for that to happen. And, processed foods.
Through pain, right? Pain teaching.
Yeah. Processed foods didn't really get introduced to the mass market until like maybe the 70s, 80s, and then 90s. It really started to explode. And so when I was a kid in the 80s, when I was a young kid in the 80s, processed foods, it wasn't like parents didn't really understand really how bad it was. So breakfast could be a Pop-Tart, lunch could be some,
You know what else? So when I went over to Florida when I was younger to go to like Orlando, when I went to America when I was younger, I used to get these big bottles of Sunny Delight. Do you remember that?
Oh yeah, I mean,
they used to glow in the dark.
It wasn't that big of a deal, No. So you ate all this crap all the time.
Lucky Charms and Sunny Delight, yeah.
Oh yeah, that was breakfast, right? And now we see all this obesity, all this diabetes, and children are developing diabetes at ridiculous rates now. And so I think millennials are starting to figure that out. It's like smoking. Smoking did the same thing. Like everybody smoked. Then we had a couple generations, lots of lung cancer, whatever. Now people are, far less people smoke than they did, 30 years ago. Far, far less. And so I think that that's happening with processed foods. But what we're seeing now is the beginning of, technology. You brought up things like iPads and that kind of stuff. Mm. I think if you ask the average parent, do you think it's a good idea that your kid is on an iPad all day long and playing with apps and video games? Most parents will say probably not a good thing, but we haven't yet learned as a society that you need to regulate it. Like we've learned now, or at least we're starting to learn with processed food. Like now, when I was a kid, if I went trick or treating with some friends for Halloween, that's an American holiday. It's where you go door to door and you collect candy. Yeah. I would get a pillow sack full of candy. And I was like 8 years old, right? Yeah. And I'd come home and I'd sit in my room and I'd eat it until I got sick. And my parents, they didn't stop me. Yeah. Today, most parents or a lot of parents now start to regulate that. Like, okay, don't eat all of them, you'll get sick or whatever. So it's kind of changed a little bit. With electronics, we're at the stage now where most parents don't regulate it whatsoever. But I think in 10, 15 years, you'll start to see parents put time restrictions and limits on electronic use because that can be abused as well. And I've just implemented that in my house. I give my kids 4 hours a week total each that they can use. That doesn't have anything to do with school, because obviously for school they have to use electronics, and they get to ration it however they want. So my son tends to use it all on the weekend, so he could just play video games with his friends. And my daughter likes to sprinkle it in during the week, and it's totally up to them how they use it. But I do limit it and regulate it, just like I would regulate anything else, because children, they don't have the same understanding as adults do, in that we need to self-regulate for certain things. And you need to kind of teach them those behaviors and those habits by setting those regulation examples, as children. So then when they get older, they can understand it, so they can also learn to self-regulate. So I think that's an important lesson as well. And it's just structure. You just have to put that structure around it. You have to adhere to your own rules. So, although I do work a lot on social media and our business is social media based, I try to be a good example by not being on my phone all day long while I'm, telling them to not be on their, devices as well. I try to be that good example as well, so that it just becomes a part of the life. You know what I mean? It's like when they're older, they remember like, well, when I grew up in my house, we we didn't use them as much as other people, and I kind of like that, and it felt good. And you tend to revert back to the things you did as a kid that you realize or recognize as an adult were probably good habits.
Didn't you also notice that their behaviour got better? I mean, I think I heard you saying, yeah.
Totally, 100%. Like, I noticed that when my son was on his computer or playing video games or whatever for long periods of time, when he'd get off, he'd be like irritated or irritable, or they're not as engaging, with each other and people in the house. They also didn't develop the ability to be bored. That's a very important skill to have as a child and as an adult, to be able to not have anything to do and be comfortable with that, and to be able to think and imagine and process and come up with ideas and things. Like, that's an important thing to do. I mean, I think we distract ourselves so much now that it's probably one of the reasons why anxiety is one of the fastest growing, mental health issues in developed worlds, is we don't allow ourselves the opportunity to sit quietly with nothing to do. And that, if you want to look in the context of human evolution, we probably did that quite a bit. I mean, we hunted, we ate, we sat there, we foraged, and then, you didn't have electronics and stuff. We probably sat there and talked with each other.
Had all day to play with the kids and stuff, yeah.
Or stared off into the sky at night, and ancient humans were able to develop calendars and predict constellations and stuff, and they did that shit because they sat there and stared and took calculations. So I think it's in humans we can come up with some incredible things when we have nothing better to do. So I think it's an important skill to develop, especially as a child. And kids these days they're never bored. They always have something to do. And parents feel like they have to give their kids something to do all the time. I'll tell my kids will be like, I'm bored. I'll be like, well, figure something out. You know what I mean? It's not my job to figure that out for you all the time,
Yeah.
So
100%. No, I completely agree. I mean, that combined with, as you said, that the ability not to be able to do that or always be distracted, combined with poor diet and then gut health and anxiety, depression just through the roof, you're intrinsically connected to your gut health with that. I mean, it's just like, it's the same as everything. It's like it's not just one thing, and it all adds up, and it causes it's like a toxic soup, and that's why you've got to be so aware of everything you're talking about there. And I think that's a huge thing. Go for it. Sorry.
Well, as I say, we've done a really good job in modern, especially modern Western societies, because we're relatively free in comparison to, how the world was before. And
that's something I wanted to talk to you about. We haven't got time today, but I'll get you back on and talk about what's going on in your country right now with this. And I know you're a big fan of Jordan Peterson and stuff, but that's a huge thing.
Yeah, as I say, we've done a good job of solving a lot of major problems like starvation, dying from things like infection or injury. Food is so abundant, we're obese now. Shelter, and I know there's still people without it, but for the most part, people have shelter. And clothing is so abundant now that we throw more clothes away than third world countries even have to wear. I mean, we've done all these wonderful things. But what we've done is, as a result, is we've also now entered into a chronic health epidemic where we've solved the acute problems, but now our health issues are the kind of chronic ones where we have anxiety, mental health issues like depression, chronic health issues, autoimmune issues, Crohn's disease, irritable bowel syndrome, rheumatism, diabetes, Alzheimer's.
Cancer's going through the roof.
Yeah, so we need to start, that's the next horizon is, okay, we've solved these other problems, but in the process, we've created these other ones. How do we now tackle those issues so that we can solve those problems? And, the wellness, fitness, and health industry, I hope, is the answer to that, to that. It's not going to be the fat loss, look awesome and ripped message, although that's part of it. It's the whole health message that I think is going to be a part of the solution.
Yeah, in the search for knowledge and improvement, we've lost a lot of wisdom, I think, around that, and that's what it comes back to when you talk about like back in the triumphs or anything. There's so much wisdom to give us, and because we think like modern technology, it's like just because we've got 2018 and we've got Wi-Fi doesn't mean you get rid of thousands of years of genetics. It's not the way it works. So I think sometimes we have to go backwards to go forwards. And I think that's a lot about what Holistic Health's about. Incorporating. Although me and you can be over Skype having a chat. We also know to do our breath work in the day, to eat right, to get the right amount of movement, the right amount of sunlight, etc., and to really look into it. I mean, mate, I know you sort of we're heading towards the end. I want to get you back on, but just for everyone out there, I mean. You guys, just quickly, how do you go about picking your guests out? Do you is it all three of you get together and you think, oh, I've heard some good stuff around this, or is it other people? I mean, you just stumbled across, or do you actually have like quite a regimented process for that one?
Well, it's a lot of factors, but the main one, the most important one, is do we think this person will be interesting to talk to? We don't have to agree with them. We don't have to think they're awesome. We just want to, have a great conversation. So typically one of us will have a suggestion. We'll bring it to the crew. And if everybody usually will agree, especially if one of us really wants to talk to someone, and then we'll, try to pursue getting them on the show, and just having a genuine conversation with the individual and letting the conversation go wherever it goes. And sometimes it goes in directions that are so opposite or different from what we anticipated. So, it's not necessarily, to interview someone that we think our audience will want to listen to, although that definitely plays a factor. It's like, okay, is this someone we're interested in? Is this somebody who, we can have a good conversation with, and somebody who will be okay with us prodding, because we do a lot of prodding when we do our interviews. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, no, you do, and it's really good because some of the best ones I think have been the ones that are just like that off the cuff. I mean, just for me and for everyone else, I don't know if you mind saying, who's been your worst guest?
Oh, geez, worst guest. The most a recent one that was difficult was Dave Asprey, who's he's the maker of coffee. Yeah, he called it. It was over Skype. Skype is a difficult medium, or over the phone is a difficult way to do interviews because, a lot of communication is nonverbal. Mm-hmm. Now, if it's one-on-one, it's a lot easier, but we have three hosts, so then it becomes very difficult to interrupt and interject. We also like to get to know people and have deep conversations. And he wouldn't let us go deep. He was very surface. It sounded like a big commercial for his products, and it just didn't seem very genuine. So that was probably one of the more recent ones that I would say we all probably agree that wasn't a good one.
Yeah, and your best?
I really enjoyed Paul Chek episode. The recent one I had with Ben Greenfield was excellent. We had a great conversation with him. We always love talking to Tom Bilyeu, who is a fitness entrepreneur. One of the first $1 billion food supplement companies. He was a lot of fun. Those are the more recent ones that we enjoyed. Ben Greenfield, one of my favorites. The most recent one we did with him was a lot of fun.
Yeah, awesome. And just for people out there, like where's the best place to find? Obviously, you're on iTunes and you've got a YouTube channel, correct?
Yeah, so we're on most podcast platforms. The podcast is Mind Pump. We have a YouTube channel with different and separate information. It's Mind Pump Media, and that's on YouTube. And then on Instagram, you can find us under Mind Pump, and my personal page is Mind Pump Sal.
Yeah, and you've got www.mindpumpmedia.com, where you've got all your different programs going into different things. People can look around there, like things for priming your body, different ways of getting the body into different shapes, aesthetically or aesthetically, which is awesome. So just hold the line in a second, mate. But thanks a lot for coming on. It's been a great talking to you, and I'll definitely be asking Dougie to get you back on the show. So, guys, that was Sal Di Stefano from the Mind Pump crew. Really good to talk to him. He's a fun interview, great conversation, and definitely be getting him back on to talk about other things, what's going on in America. I know lots is going on, especially with this this transgender movement, lots of things politically as well, which is interesting to hear other people that's out there side of the story. But yeah, I mean, great interview, and got some really good guests coming up for you. Definitely talking about, next one's going to be all about chemtrails with Bye Bye Blue Sky, which will be really interesting. So that's it for today, guys. As always, any articles or any help that you want with a chronic health issue, whether it be skin, gut, adrenal, thyroid, diabetes, or chronic fatigue, head on over to www.reviveyourself.co. Otherwise, take care. As always, stay healthy, stay happy, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye-bye.
If you're struggling with gut issues, such as gas, bloating, constipation, diarrhea, indigestion, heartburn, and want to finally be able to eat the foods you love without the crippling after effects, then don't forget to head over to reviveyourself.co and pick up your free copy of The Healing Health Paradigm today.